Welcome in on a Friday, everybody. I'm Reed Cowan. The Harris campaign hoping Obama presence equals Obama power in the race for the presidency, and Team Trump returning to the scene of that first assassination attempt in a rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, the Keystone State key to winning the presidency. Plus, watching your wallet and some encouraging news on a Friday. The September job report is out. How will the Fed and the Federal Reserve react? This is CBS News 24/7. Let's go. We'll get to those domestic issues in just a minute, but we begin on the international front, as the Middle East is a hotbed right now for tension and a lot of worry. So look at this video on the left. This video to our monitor shows Iran's supreme leader leading a prayer in Tehran. Now, he hasn't done this in a display like this in several years. While praying, he's also vowing that his country and its allies will not back down after its missile attack on Israel. Israel, meanwhile, launching airstrikes, hitting Beirut suburbs. Look at this. Blasts in the night and huge fireballs over that city in the darkness. And yesterday, another strike, we understand, cut off the main border crossing between Lebanon and Syria for tens of thousands who are in that area trying to escape. Watching it all in real time, CBS News foreign correspondent Chris Livesay joining us live from Tel Aviv. Chris, what was Israel targeting with these latest round of attacks?
Hey there, Reed. Well, as you mentioned, that conduit, that's just a crucial lifeline for people trying to flee those Israeli airstrikes. According to Lebanese officials, more than 1 million people have already been displaced by the airstrikes and now Israel's ground incursion taking place in southern Lebanon. It wasn't completely a surprise, however. Israel had already warned that that conduit had been used by Hezbollah fighters for transporting weapons. Remember, Lebanon is not on the border with Iran, and so in order to get these weapons, it's believed that they were coming across this border crossing with Syria that previously Hezbollah fighters, according to the IDF, had not been using. And then in that other strike, as you mentioned, the Israeli military says they were targeting the headquarters of Hezbollah's Central Intelligence. They didn't say exactly who they were targeting, but according to the New York Times and Axios, they were trying to get Hashem Asaduddin, who is the assumed successor to Hassan Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah, who was assassinated last week.
Fundamental to this international conversation is the connectivity between Iran and Hezbollah in Lebanon. These strikes came just hours after Iran's foreign minister arrived in Beirut. What more can you tell us about that?
Yeah, clearly a sign of unity between Iran and Lebanon, or I should say between Iran and Hezbollah, who is indeed a proxy of Iran, and also to show some kind of unity between what the Ayatollah was doing in Tehran and that very rare Friday sermon that he gave today, in which he expressed unity not just with Hezbollah but also with Hamas, commemorating the attacks, praising the attacks of October 7 as people here in Israel are about to mourn those attacks. So, really opening a wound. As he was carrying a gun in his hand, it's worth noting, he warned that there would be further attacks on Israel. That's a reference to that massive missile barrage that flew over Israel earlier this week. About more than 180 ballistic missiles, most of which were shot down, but just a clear escalation and what seems to be just an endless series of escalations, especially when you have both Iran and Israel vowing to do more.
A week of very long shifts for you, Chris Livesay, opening up to the world and a picture of what is going on there in the Middle East. We appreciate your reporting here on CBS News 24/7. Stay safe. Meanwhile, Vice President Kamala Harris will be talking about the Middle East on the campaign trail over the weekend, while former President Barack Obama, he's joining in the stump for votes, trying to get Kamala Harris elected. So we just got Mr. Obama's schedule over the next month, and no surprise, the former president will be in key battleground states where those votes are crucial in electing a president. This beating the trail in the next weeks leading up to the general election. CBS News campaign reporter Shauna Mizell tracking the Harris team today. So what more do we know about this Obama strategy, Shauna?
Well, according to a senior campaign official, former President Barack Obama is going to be out on the campaign trail voicing his support for the Harris-Walz ticket, but that's actually going to start next week on Thursday in Pittsburgh. We're going to see Obama in other battleground states, but he's starting out in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, which is one of those highly contested states that we've been covering this entire election. Harris herself has actually visited Pennsylvania 13 times just this year, but I do find it interesting that Obama was one of the last prominent Democrats to come in and endorse Harris's candidacy when Biden first dropped out of the race, and we haven't yet seen them on the campaign trail together. So that's something we'll be watching to see if that happens in the weeks to come.
I agree with you. It's fascinating to see that they are rolling him out now at the 11th hour, and maybe he is going to be the closing argument for Kamala Harris. We will wait and see. While we have you, Harris is also in the battleground state of Michigan. What is her message to voters there? And that also key and crucial state.
Vice President Kamala Harris hitting Flint, Michigan today for a campaign rally, and we are going to be looking to see if she repeats some of those same attack lines that she unveiled yesterday at her event with Liz Cheney. These were new lines. This was not Harris's typical stump speech, and so we'll see if she repeats that or if she goes back to the regularly scheduled program. But we're also going to be watching because Michigan is a state where you had that block of uncommitted voters, so we will be watching to see if Harris addresses the war in Israel and Gaza.
Shauna, thank you so much for streaming with us on a Friday. Have a great weekend. Meanwhile, candidate Donald Trump in the state of Georgia with continued tours of affected areas. Hurricane Helene really tore through. He's going to be there delivering remarks, in fact, alongside Governor Brian Kemp. And we're also learning new details about that task force investigation into the assassination attempt against the former president in Butler, Pennsylvania. Yesterday, we told you about its request for documents by the from the ATF, or the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. Well, now that same task force is looking for records not only from the ATF, but also from Homeland Security, the Secret Service, the Justice Department, and the FBI. That includes all of their intelligence reports, all of their finances, and even copies of security procedures. So a lot of documents yet to be exchanged and trading hands. CBS News' Nicole Killian is following the Trump campaign. There's some notable company set to attend today's event in Georgia. What can you tell us about the importance of Governor Kemp's presence to the Trump campaign?
Yeah, well, good afternoon to you, Reed. I mean, obviously, what's significant about this is this will be the first time that these two men have been together since 2020. Obviously, we know that the former president was very up in arms about the results here in the state of 2020 and actually was indicted for allegedly interfering in the 2020 election here in the state. He was disparaged. Governor Brian had time and again, even as recently as this summer, calling him disloyal. So Governor Kemp, for his part, has also kind of kept the former president at arm's length as well. So to be able to see them stand side by side here will be a very significant optic. But Governor Kemp has also made clear that in terms of helping the state recover from the damage here with respect to Hurricane Helene, this is something that shouldn't be politicized. So perhaps that is one part of the reason why the governor will be here. He was also here in Augusta earlier this week. The former president also was in Valdosta, Georgia earlier this week. And of course, as people try to get themselves back on their feet, there's also a lot of concern as the election approaches, because we know next week ballots will start going out to people, but those who have been displaced may have a hard time getting those ballots. We spoke to an elections official earlier today here in Columbia County. Take a listen to what she told me about her concerns going forward.
I mean, it's really about networking and being able to help one another. You know, make sure you don't miss a certain email because you're tied up trying to relocate precincts or whatever, you know. So, I mean, I think we're good. I think we're good. It's just the voters that I worry about, trying to get the message out that do go vote early if at all possible. If you get that ballot and you can't go vote early, then have a family member bring it into our office.
So they're really encouraging people to early vote, and that period starts in roughly about a week and a half on October 15th. Simply because at this point it's too late to try to change their address.
All right, Nicole Killian, we so apologize for having to jump in. We're having some microphone troubles there. We know everything you say is so important. We'll try to turn that around and get back to you. Thank you so much, Nicole. Let's move on now from that and talk about what's coming up next in this broadcast. VP nominee J.D. Vance is making the case for a Trump presidency to voters in Georgia. CBS News 24/7, streaming coast to coast and worldwide. Back on a Friday in just a moment. Let's get now to some dogged and some very determined police work out of the East Coast. So police put the cuffs on a person in the alleged rape of a Villanova University student. Here's how CBS News Philadelphia broke the coverage earlier.
Breaking right now at noon on CBS News Philadelphia. Sources confirm police have arrested an Uber driver for the alleged rape of a Villanova student inside a campus dorm. Good afternoon. I'm Jan Carabeo in for Jim Donovan today. Investigators say the rape happened nearly 3 weeks ago, and it has put that campus community on edge. Chief investigative reporter Joe Holden has been pushing to get answers in this case and has more on the breaking developments. Joe.
John, good afternoon. Sources confirming a 26-year-old Montgomery County man has now been arrested and charged in connection to that reported rape in a Commons residence hall on Villanova University 3 weeks ago today. That was Friday, September 13th. Court records show and sources confirm to me Mervyn Dindler of Trapp, Montgomery County is facing counts of rape, sexual assault, indecent assault, and reckless endangerment. The accuser first reported the alleged attack to the school's Department of Public Safety 2 weeks ago today. That same day, the university notified the school community and issued statements to CBS News Philadelphia. The university in its statement said they had identified the perpetrator and that he was an Uber driver. They also said at the time he was banned from campus. Uber has said in a statement it is cooperating with investigators and the driver was banned from their ride-share service. CBS News Philadelphia has since followed the investigation closely and has made numerous requests for comment and updates from Villanova. Neither the school nor its public safety department responded. A spokesperson this morning referred our questions to the Delaware County District Attorney's Office. So back on Monday, the DA's office here, along with Radnor Township Police, assumed lead of the investigation. Detectives say Dindler was taken into custody at his Montgomery County residence early this morning without incident. Now, court records show he is scheduled for an arraignment this afternoon, and we are waiting information on his possible bail amount, if he will walk out of this courthouse or if he will be held unable to make that bond. He does have a tentative preliminary hearing set up for October 10th. That is before Judge Andrew Goldberg. We are also now awaiting comment from the district attorney's office on the arrest in this case that, John, as you said, put an entire university campus on edge. We will continue to follow. We're live outside the DA's office in media. Joe Holden, CBS News, Philadelphia.
Our video feed's now taking us to Washington, D.C., where the Supreme Court has a major question to consider this afternoon. Can Mexico sue gun makers for cases of border violence? So here's the backstory. A lower court ruled the lawsuit holding gun makers responsible can go forward. Now the case is before the Supreme Court. Those companies include Smith & Wesson, and they want the High Court to stop the suit. The court's new term starts Monday. That is when they take this up. After a major push by celebrities and legal experts, the famous Menendez brothers murder case is back in the headlines. Here it is. Lyle and Eric Menendez admitted to killing their parents in 1989, but new eyes on the case want to look at new evidence that could end in the brothers being released. Well, those brothers claim their father was a child molester and that killing him was self-defense. Attorneys for the brothers say that evidence was not put before jurors at the time, which could have changed everything. Now the case is up for review after new evidence has come forward, including reports that another young man outside the family also claims the Menendez father also molested him. Ports along the east and Gulf Coast up and running again today after dock workers suspended their strike, threatening the company's supply chain. This is something we've talked about in recent days. Now there's been a change. Those dock workers want a raise. They want protections against automation in their industry. That hasn't changed. But here's the change. As of today, word of a tentative agreement between workers and their dock bosses. No finish line yet, but the sides have agreed to suspend the strike until January 15th. Here's the caveat. If a final deal doesn't get done before that date, dock workers say you can see this picture once again. They may strike again. Let's take you down to North Carolina and a look at one of the cities hit the very hardest from Hurricane Helene. You are looking at more aftermath from the beautiful city of Asheville, North Carolina. This is a tourist destination. It is a gem in the Carolinas. And now that gem is covered in mud and debris. Thousands of people without electricity. So difficult to even get water from the ground. So running water isn't even a possibility in many parts. Cell service also out. President Biden has called in members of the National Guard to help out, and it is going to be weeks and months to recover there in the Carolinas. Jess, this is a tragedy.
It really is a tragedy. It's been catastrophic in those communities, especially in those higher elevated areas with smaller towns just around Asheville, too. Let's take a look at the tropics, because of course that's the big concern right now. We're still in hurricane season, and it is active out in the Atlantic, just not near us. It's almost hard to tell, but well offshore, there's Hurricane Kirk and Tropical Storm Leslie that are not going to pose a threat for the states. However, interestingly enough, if you take a look at that track, well offshore, it's still sitting around a Category 4 right now, that hurricane, and we're going to continue to keep a close eye on that heading into the coming days. Let's zoom out real fast and show you where it's currently at right now. Hurricane Kirk at a Category 4 with max sustained winds around 140 miles per hour. Interestingly enough, as it hits warmer sea surface temperatures, it's going to stay well offshore, entering close to the European Union as we head into the coming days, and that could potentially impact countries like France with just light showers as we head into next week. Now, changing gears a little bit, nothing's impacting us back here in the States, but we do have some active weather down in the south that just got hit last week with the hurricane here. I mean, Category 4 swept throughout the Big Bend of Florida, and we're still dealing with scattered thunderstorms right now for our severe weather outlook. Taking a look at Futurecast heading into the coming days, areas like New Orleans stretching into southern Alabama and all the way over into that Florida coast near Destin and PCB. Active weather is expected as we head into our weekend forecast. It is Friday, Reed, and it is still active down there, but we also have the big story of the heat over in the west, which we're going to have more on in just a bit.
We know a few people dealing with that right now.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so the September jobs report is out. Wall Street is reacting, but so also are members of the Trump camp. Why they are blasting a new and very sunny outlook on our economy when we come back. Good news to talk about in the labor market. The latest jobs report is out, showing the U.S. added 254,000 jobs in the month of September. That really blew past expectations and really marking the strongest monthly gain since March. The unemployment rate fell to 4.1%. The numbers sending the stock market smiling this morning. The Dow is up. You can see right there the numbers on your screen. CBS News senior business and tech correspondent Jolene Kent digs into the numbers for us. Hi, Jolene.
Hi, how's it going? Good news today, huh?
Yeah, a lot of people are happy about this. A big question, how is this going to affect everything else, not the least of which the narrative in politics, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So looking at where the jobs have been added, we saw some good news in bars and restaurants and hospitality in particular. Government, healthcare, construction also added jobs. We did see some job loss when it comes to warehousing as well as manufacturing. But here's the really bright spot that I think a lot of people might miss in the headlines, but you really should know about. Wages compared to a year ago in September are up 4%. That was unexpected when it comes to how much higher they grew. And so if you look at that pace, it far outpaces inflation, which is currently sitting at 2.5%.
So, Jolene, these strong numbers have President Biden doing kind of a victory lap. He said, and I quote, "With today's report, we've created 16 million jobs. Unemployment remains low and wages are growing faster than prices," close quote. Well, meanwhile, the Trump campaign called the jobs report fake, saying Americans don't trust these reports because they feel the pain of the economy every day. So how will this report have an impact on the campaigns as we get closer to Election Day?
Look, this is all about swing voters and how they feel about the economy. For so many people, it is their number one issue. We've been out on the campaign trail in the 45th district, for example, here in California, that congressional district, very hotly contested between Republican and a Democrat. We also have been across the country to swing states over the last year talking to people. And the idea here is that the vibe session is still very real. Even though wages, for example, are outpacing inflation, which is good news by the numbers, so many people are looking at their auto insurance, their grocery checkout bill, and they still see the prices continue to go up. Yes, they're going up more slowly, but it still is an affordability issue for so many people. The good news is gas prices are coming down, but then you also still have, higher than average inflation when it comes to rent. And so these kind of big line items, when it comes to your monthly budget are still very painful for a lot of people as they head to the polls in just about 3 weeks. And so there is a tendency, according to our polling, to remember President Trump's economy more fondly, so to speak, versus the Biden-Harris administration, although inflation has cooled off significantly over the past 2 years, going from that peak of about 9.1% down to 2.5%. The big question here is, how does this impact the Federal Reserve and those interest rates that you're paying on your car loan, your mortgage, your credit card, all of that? We still expect that this is going to be good evidence for the Fed to cut interest rates in November and December. We do expect now Fed Chair Powell earlier this week saying it's going to be about a quarter-point cut in both of those months. We'll see how they're able to stick the landing on that front.
So fascinating. Jolene Kent, I wish that you could report every day for us and also come balance my checkbook once in a while. You're smart. Thank you so much for always being a joy with us on
I don't think you want that. Thank you. Great to be with you.
We'll compare. I think you probably would do line items better than I would. Jolene Kent, thank you so much. Hey, our live video feed's now taking us out west to Northern California in San Jose. We've been talking heat all week. Don't expect relief, though, for the next few days. Jess, we're going to blame it on you.
Oh, no, don't blame it on me. But I will say over 30 million people are dealing with extreme heat right now, widespread throughout the West Coast. Along the California coastline, stretching down into San Diego and right back up into the Bay, there has been record-breaking numbers recently. San Jose just 2 days ago hit a record-breaking number. Local communities all throughout the Bay have. And down into areas like Phoenix and Las Vegas, stretching over into Denver. We've seen record-breaking numbers this week from this extreme heat dome that's just sitting over the West Coast. We're going to continue to see this warmth as we head into the coming days. All the pink you see below me right now, that's actually red flag warnings too. Up closer to Billings, Montana, stretching over into the Dakotas. What's happening right now is interesting, and let's see if I can time this out perfectly. We have some strong winds right around the corner as we head into the rest of this weekend's forecast. A strong frontal system's moving throughout the north. You can see it right there throughout the next 24 hours with damaging winds expected up in those communities too. So let's drop the map and let's take a look at what's happening for us. Let's go back to the heat real fast over in the West Coast. This is really the big story for many local communities from Vegas down into San Diego and everywhere in between throughout Southern California. Our heat risk map today, stretched all the way into our Sunday forecast, really doesn't change too much. If anything, it starts to amplify into cities like Phoenix all the way over into Los Angeles. Well above average temperatures are expected there. And as we take a look at the next 6 to 10 days, the Climate Prediction Center is showing above normal conditions widespread throughout those states, on top of those strong winds too, which allows for red flag warnings up in that community. You have fire weather conditions with those strong winds, and of course this above average weather. Doesn't feel like fall, Reed.
Does not. Just watch this, because we know you travel to this part of the world quite a bit. Video to our monitors out of Thailand, where people are on the run from severe flooding due to severe storms. Listen, they don't get a break there either. Many people forced out of their homes. And when you look at this video, it's no surprise, right? Well, even more sad to tell you, more flooding could be on the way. And look at this. This is in a popular tourist area of Chiang Mai, where a river is just about to burst its banks. So already the water high. If a river bursts the banks, it's going to be catastrophic for so many people who hope these waters recede so they can get back into their businesses and get tourists back into that area. They need it so very much. Let's jump the map now to Taiwan, where Typhoon Krathon hit hard. Looks pretty sedate right now, but you don't see a lot of people out on the roads because, look at that, there's not a lot of markets to go to. Workers are out in those flood waters and in the weather trying to get the lights back on. Some of those businesses just collapsed. And they also want to get the water running from faucets once again. That storm made landfall yesterday, bringing fierce winds and torrential rain to that island, and this is the result. We also want to jump the map on the globe to Bosnia now, and look at this. The result of torrential rain, flash floods, even landslides. This hit overnight. Right now, 16 people counted among the dead as water continues to run. The downpour sent those waters rushing, in fact, into people's homes as they slept. So that explains many of those deaths. But look at that guy waiting there up to his hips in water. Those flood waters are starting to recede. People are trying to tempt the roads a little bit to try to get out, but debris and mud left behind. By the way, neighboring Croatia, Montenegro, and Serbia are now also under severe weather warnings. When we come back, we're going to take you live to the United States, where Mother Nature has also caused a lot of damage. We're going to go to the Carolinas. We're going to talk to Manuel Bojorquez. He is there where so much mud gathered at so many people's doorsteps and caused so much havoc from Hurricane Helene. Stay with us. All right, you got to see this. We want to have you look at this. These are new satellite images right now that show the devastation of Hurricane Helene in North Carolina. This right here that you're looking at, the rooftop of an elementary school in the town of Old Fort. You can see right there where the floodwaters just caused so much problems. They washed out streets all around that school. They just left behind a sea of mud. Kids can't go there. Teachers can't go there. It's closed. The Southeast continues to dig out 1 week after Hurricane Helene tore through that region. It is what they're living with right now. But then we also want to show you this image. You can see empty spaces right here. This is where homes once stood. You can see rooftops there, but then all around the rooftops, just a lot of mud. A lot of downed trees, a lot of power lines. So people who drive through Old Fort, North Carolina can see a new picture, and that picture is devastation and really a call for people to step up and help each other. They're also hurting deeply, not only because of property loss, but the death toll is up. At least 219 people lost their lives. Dozens are still unaccounted for at this hour, with search efforts continuing. So after the sun goes down, the search for survivors is really tough because this area where you're looking at, power's out. Tens of thousands of people cannot flip the switch and get the electricity to go back on. So much to deal with there in these United States, and so many people rushing in to help. CBS News national correspondent Manuel Bojorquez, he joins us live now from Marshall, North Carolina. Oh, what's next for the people that we're talking about right there, who've lost so much, who are dealing not only with property loss, but the loss of life?
Yeah, they're trying to clean up. This is the historic downtown section of Marshall, North Carolina, right next to the French Broad River, which clearly overflowed its banks. You might be able to make out, but as far as the eye can see here, there is nothing but a thick layer of mud and debris piles along the side of this road here. And in fact, many people are considering that this thick mud is likely hazardous. So we've seen volunteers arriving here wearing what look to be hazmat suits. So the heavy machinery going in, the debris starting to go out. But I want to give you a sense for perspective here of just how high the water came. You can see this debris pile back there. That's the bank of the river. And you can see how high that is. That's how high the water came here. So, you know, as people clean up, they're also, of course, cognizant of the fact that the real tragedy, the bigger tragedy here is the loss of life, and that the search for storm victims continues.
Yeah, I've covered flooding in areas where you are, also in Haiti during the epic floods there, and that debris pile that you show is just like a blender as it goes through the water, and so you can see why it's so devastating as it picks up and goes through. Let's talk about the recovery efforts. You know, so many critical supplies were lost in the storm. Things that were in storehouses ready to go for emergencies also wiped out. So what do they do now with that reality?
Well, they're trying to reopen the roads best they can so that they can get those trucks in here with the heavy machinery that they need to start to clean up and rebuild, but also food, the power trucks that are repairing the power lines that fell down during the storm. They're trying to get all that in place. And in fact, we have seen that in many of these locations, you're having that work really start in earnest. We are a full week after the storm. But one of the big problems going forward for many people is the fact that because they've never had flooding like this before, many of them lacked flood insurance. It's going to make it that much harder for them to get back on their feet.
Well, it's a catastrophe, and now it's a calling in our communities to step forward and help, and no doubt people will do that. Manuel Bojorquez, thank you for helping out in your regard by opening up a window to this story to the world. Thank you, thank you. Okay, so let's go to Tennessee now, where receding floodwaters really reveal the full extent of the damage there. You are looking right now at Newport, and you can see tree limbs down there, and that's cluttering streets. It's hard for emergency crews and personnel to get through. This street, thankfully, cleaned up, but you can see what they had to pull off of the streets. It's been this way since the end of September, when hundreds had to use these streets to get out and evacuate, run for their lives, leaving behind their homes. Well, now they're coming back to pick through the mud, the debris, and anything that's left. By the way, Tennessee Governor Bill Lee this morning said that area is in bad shape, needing a lot of help just about everywhere you look. So, Jess, chance for all of us to step up.
Exactly. All those community members coming together right now. And now as we take a look at the tropics, of course, everyone's eyes are still on it because we're in the middle of hurricane season. Taking a look at the Atlantic specifically, there are 2 storms that are well offshore. But as you take a look at the track of them, they're nothing to be concerning of when it comes to our west or east coast, let's take a quick look at what's happening for us, starting off with that first hurricane. Hurricane Kirk, well offshore of our east coast, and as it continues to track north, entering into those warmer sea surface temperatures, it's going to continue to gain strength. Right now, sitting at a Category 4, it actually curls off into the east, over into Europe, and as we head into the coming days, we're actually going to see this impact France with just thunderstorm activity as it starts to decay, moving into those cooler sea surface temperatures. Changing gears, though, now over into the south. Just last week, we were talking about storm surge, devastating winds, as well as that heavy rain and localized flooding widespread throughout those communities. Now we have scattered thunderstorms in the forecast for us into the same communities like Panama City Beach, Destin, all the way down into the Tampa Bay area too. As we head into this weekend's forecast, the severe weather outlook is really just isolated down in the Gulf as these warm conditions continue to stick around throughout the next couple days, and that's what's allowing for this thunderstorm activity to occur. We'll have more on this coming up in a bit, as well as that heat off into the west coast, impacting over 30 million people. But for now, over to you, Reed.
Our thoughts with everybody there. All right, so let's go to the Middle East now, where Israeli strikes in Lebanon intensify. You can see that golden glow in the night there. The most recent round of bombs cutting off a key road used by thousands trying to flee Lebanon. So let's go to CBS News correspondent Imtiaz Tayyab in Beirut.
Israel's overnight bombing campaign near Beirut's main airport was so intense, it shook the city. By morning, the devastation was clear to see. The Israeli military hasn't said what it was targeting, but Lebanese media suggest it was a potential successor to Hassan Nasrallah, the longtime Hezbollah leader who was assassinated in a similar Israeli strike here exactly 1 week ago. In that week, at least 417 people have been killed in Israeli ground and air attacks, according to Lebanese health officials, including American Kamal Ahmed Jawad from Dearborn, Michigan, a volunteer who was killed in an airstrike in southern Lebanon, according to his family. In a statement, the White House said it was deeply saddened by Jawad's death. The skyrocketing casualties are pushing Lebanon's already frail healthcare system to the brink. At least 40 paramedics and firefighters have also been killed in Israeli strikes in just the past 3 days, said the country's health minister, raising fears the system could collapse, says emergency doctor Ziad Abu Al-Anaim.
Our greatest fear is to receive a very big number of the patients and you cannot deal with them.
As a doctor, that must be really painful.
Yes, because we saw what happened in Gaza and we don't want it to happen here.
Are you afraid that that's what's going to happen?
Yes.
In southern Lebanon, where Israeli strikes are only intensifying, Israel issued evacuation orders to residents of 24 towns and villages, raising fears a full-scale ground invasion is imminent.
And President Joe Biden said more needed to be done to avoid a wider war from spreading across the Middle East after Israel vowed to retaliate against Iran's Tuesday ballistic missile attack, which was triggered by the assassination of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah 1 week ago. Read.
Imtiaz, thank you so much. Meanwhile, Iran sending an ambassador into Beirut today. We're waiting to see what that means, but by all intents and purposes, it means a show of support by Iran for Hezbollah in Lebanon. When we come back, we're going to be going live to the White House press briefing room. Karine Jean-Pierre is expected to stand before that podium and answer questions about these very topics that are commanding so many headlines around the country. We're back after the break. CBS News, Eye on America keeps our dedication where it belongs, right where you live in communities all across our great country. Well, a Supreme Court ruling earlier this year gives local governments the authority to ban people from sleeping and camping in public places. This is what so many communities like Los Angeles are dealing with. Critics say the ruling does nothing to solve the problem of homelessness in our nation. CBS News correspondent Adam Yamaguchi takes us to Los Angeles, where the mayor in that city launched a program some actually think and hope in very big ways could provide more of a long-term solution.
This is Coley King's mobile exam room.
We want to be there for them.
4 days a week in Los Angeles, the street doctor with the Venice Family Clinic makes house calls to those without homes.
We saw you, and really the last time was 2021. And then after that, we kind of lost track. We lost contact, so here you are.
53-year-old Melissa is one of more than 45,000 people experiencing homelessness in the city of Los Angeles.
There are patients that suffer from very serious medical illnesses. There are patients that have schizophrenia, have HIV. So I think there's urgency from everyone to solve this.
Nearly half of all Americans living on the streets are here in California, where there was roughly one shelter bed for every 3 people who needed one last year.
It's time to move with urgency at the local level to clean up these sites.
Earlier this year, leaders like California Governor Gavin Newsom were empowered to take action in clearing encampments after the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that cities could ban people from sleeping outside.
There are no longer any excuses.
Easy to say, perhaps, but the reality is more complicated.
The goal has got to be to solve the problem.
Karen Bass is the mayor of Los Angeles.
Our problem here is we don't have enough housing. We need to build. We need to purchase buildings.
And that's where she's focused, getting people off the streets and into shelter that up until now did not exist. She's doing it by leveraging empty motels and city-owned properties with the goal of moving people indoors urgently and clearing encampments permanently.
You don't solve anything by clearing an encampment and just moving them to the next street.
So far, since 2022, her Inside Safe program has brought more than 3,000 people indoors from over 60 encampments. And the city has seen a drop in street homelessness.
This area right here, many months ago, was filled with tents. And you can imagine what family wants to bring their kids here right there if this is filled with tents and you're afraid of the people that are here. And look at it now.
Jessica has been unsheltered since 2019. Just days after we met her, she was placed in interim housing.
I should be able to get some more rest, but this has been very stressful.
Others, like Brian, are still waiting.
It's hard to be on camera showing this.
We're dealing with massive numbers, so it is going to take a while. I wish I could tell you that on this date, this problem would be ended. I can't do that. But what I do know is that if we continue along with the trajectory that we're headed on, we will be able to solve this problem.
It's an approach that could also solve a problem for Dr. King.
You may lose contact with people unless there's a plan in place.
Absolutely. We may lose them, and we may lose them forever because they are that sick. I have faith that here we're already on that pathway to try to do this the right way.
A crisis decades in the making, changing one day, one life at a time. For Eye on America, I'm Adam Yamaguchi in Los Angeles.
Adam raises a good point in that story. Similar interim housing efforts also being implemented in the San Francisco Bay Area, Northern California, and proponents of that say it seems to be working. All right, so we are also watching our video feeds for stories out of New York. Top of mind right now out of the Big Apple, an expected ruling in the case involving a former Marine charged in that chokehold death on the subway. Here's the storytelling from our team at CBS News New York.
A ruling on evidence is expected soon in the upcoming manslaughter trial of Daniel Penny, the Marine Corps veteran accused in a subway chokehold death. A judge is deciding if certain statements that he made can be played at trial later this month. Christina Fan has the details from Lower Manhattan.
Good morning. We expect a ruling to come down sometime later today about whether or not comments Daniel Penny made to officers on body camera footage and at the local precinct will be allowed at trial later on this month. Penny has pleaded not guilty to manslaughter and criminally negligent homicide charges stemming from the subway chokehold death of Jordan Neely in May of 2023. In an interview played in court Thursday, Penny told a detective Neely was acting aggressively, throwing things and threatening to kill people on the F train. He said Neely approached him, and that's when Penny put him in a chokehold. He told the detective, "I'm not trying to kill the guy. I'm just trying to de-escalate the situation." The defense argued the statements came while Penny was detained without probable cause to arrest. However, prosecutors said the statements were obtained legally. Again, a judge is expected to make a ruling sometime later today. Reporting from Lower Manhattan, Christina Fan, CBS News, New York.
Thanks, Christina. Let's jump the map now to the other side of the country. Let's go out west, where we are looking live at the Beehive State of Salt Lake City. Well, the state of Utah, that's the Beehive State. This is Salt Lake City. Jess, you need some of that cool Utah Jello to stay cool out there.
Oh, I'm sure they know exactly what you're talking about. Let's take a quick look at what's happening as we head into the afternoon hours today. Widespread throughout the West Coast. We have been talking about extreme heat. All this pink you see on this map and orange over into California, these are excessive heat warnings and heat advisories impacting over 30 million people as we head into our weekend forecast. There's also red flag warnings too and high wind alerts just up north closer to states like Montana as we head into the coming days. Here's what's happening for us as we head into the afternoon hours today. I'm going to turn off the advisories issued by the National Weather Service, and I'm going to show you what's happening for us for our daytime highs. We've been breaking records in cities like Denver, stretching all the way down into Phoenix, Las Vegas, San Jose, all the way down into Southern California. I could talk about it for days. It's been record-breaking heat in these communities. The Bay Area, for the first time since the 80s, have been seeing well above average temperatures, up to around 108 degrees in certain spots. Now, here's what's happening also with those high wind warnings as we head into the next 24 hours. Areas like Billings, we're going to see a really strong frontal system move throughout that area, and that's going to bring in damaging winds to communities stretching all the way from Idaho over into the Dakotas. So let's take a look behind me real fast and go right back to the southwest. Heading into the afternoon hours today, our heat risk map is highlighted in that high to very high category throughout many large populated areas. Las Vegas, like I just said, broke records this week for our daytime highs. And as we zoom in and take a look at those communities, along the coast, it's a lot better. San Diego stretching up into Los Angeles, you get that nice onshore flow, but it's those inland spots the moment you head over into Palm Springs, heading into this weekend where we're still dealing with above normal conditions. Now, this huge ridge of high pressure is impacting millions of people widespread throughout the West. And for the next 6 to 10 days, the Climate Prediction Center is showing well above normal conditions to stick around, while many communities that were devastated by the hurricane are dealing with a lot cooler weather. I'll have more on that in a bit. For now, over to you, Reed.
Jess, we want to get to this quickly. This just in, the U.S. says military strikes hit more than a dozen Houthi targets in Yemen today. Officials report hits at 5 locations, and they have a big objective here. Just take out weapons and other equipment belonging to Iranian-backed rebels. These attacks come just days after the group threatened military operations, once again targeting Israel. Our feed's now taking us to Washington, D.C., where the U.S. Supreme Court has a major question to consider. Can Mexico sue gunmakers for cases of violence on the border? So here's the backstory on this. A lower court ruled the lawsuit holding gunmakers responsible can proceed. Now the case is going back up the ladder to the Supreme Court this time. Those companies, and by the way, some heavy hitters, including Smith & Wesson, they want the high court to stop the lawsuit. The court's new term starts Monday, and so does the question on that issue. After a major push by celebrities and legal experts, the famous Menendez brothers murder case is back in the headlines. You are looking at file video from long ago of Lyle and Eric Menendez. At the time, they admitted to killing their parents back in 1989. But new eyes on the case want to look at new evidence that could end in both brothers being released. By the way, the Menendez brothers claim their father was a child molester and that killing him was self-defense. Attorneys for the brothers say that evidence was not put before jurors at the time, which could have changed everything. Now the case is up for review after new evidence came forward, including this. Reports that another young man outside the family also claims the Menendez father also molested him. One to watch. Ports along the east and Gulf Coast up and running today once again after dock workers suspended their strike, threatening the company's supply chain. Those dock workers want a raise, and they want protections against automation in their industry. So here's where we are today. Tentative agreement in place between workers and dock bosses. This tentative agreement is just that, it's tentative. No finish line yet. They're just going to suspend the strike until January 15th. If an agreement isn't made by then, they will strike once again. Before we leave you, we want to let you know we continue watching the White House briefing room, the press briefing room, to see what will be said about Iran.